Mitsooz, we connect you with artists by going beyond the finished piece and into the story behind it. I'm Starah Dixon, founder of Mitsooz, and these are our studio dialogues, conversations with artists and creators that reveal the process, inspiration, and personal narratives behind their work. Today, we're featuring Carol Roark, a Mississippi-based painter and educator whose work is shaped by a deep connection to the Southern landscape and the shifting presence of life within it. Through both studio practice and plein air painting, her work captures quiet moments of atmosphere, color, and place, inviting viewers into landscapes that feel both intimate and deeply observed. So now, without further ado, our studio dialogue with Carol Roark.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Roark, an artist on the Mississippi Delta. I've been into art, I guess, forever. I can remember when I was a little girl, I would have picture books and I would trace the pictures and then draw them after I made the indentation on the paper so it looked like I did it. But my first love was actually always sitting on the back of a horse. So most of the drawings involved the horses. I grew and went through high school. I was the girl that, let's get her to do the bulletin boards. Let's get her to illustrate the newspaper. So that was always there. I was so tunnel visioned on writing. And so I went to a small school to ride on their collegiate team. My goal was to go from there to training for a full-time job. I had to have an elective in the arts, whether it be theater or visual or music. And so, of course, I chose visual and I had to take art appreciation. The professor there was a wonderful lady named Susan Dorsey. I don't know, she saw something. So she actually offered for the first time at this community college, so a 2-year college, she offered freehand one. And I think she did it just so I could take it. And I took it, obviously. So she pulled me aside. She gave me a senior show at this school. And she said, my husband is department head at Mississippi State University's art department. Would you just go talk to him? Upon arriving at Mississippi State and touring their art department, it just felt like home. I still thought I'd train horses, but I knew that was, not much of a reality. And so I went home and told my parents I probably wasn't going to train horses, but it was fine. I was going to be an artist. And my poor parents. But they supported it all. They supported every bit of it. Finished my degree there. Again, the art supported the horses. So I went into equine portraiture and illustration. I was always drawn to painting, but I did have an emphasis in graphic design because I felt like that was a more marketable career choice. I was terrible at graphic design. Hated graphic design. And that was also the time period where it was mostly becoming computerized. I knew I did not want that, but at least I had, I emphasis in my degree. So I spent the next several years painting equine and canine portraits, doing illustrations for magazines. Of course, illustration was still a thing way back then. As those years progressed, and I was also teaching a little, just small kids class type things. I knew I wanted to be more of a painter, not just a technically good painter. I wanted to really paint. And that's when I met an artist who is actually a professor at another university named Sammy Britt. He did a workshop at a friend of mine's studio about a mile the road from our house. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child. It was completely outside, completely plein air. And it was in July in the South. It was very frustrating. He was a tough instructor, but I loved him dearly. He opened doors and opened my eyes in ways I never had happen before. I became obsessed at that point. And I didn't think I lived I knew I loved the landscape, but I never really saw Mississippi. Mississippi was always a place I wanted to leave, I thought. And so I mentioned to him one day, he asked why I did more landscape painting. And I said, I need to be somewhere else. I need to be out west or in, the Colorado Rockies or the East Coast, somewhere that I considered beautiful. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, you don't know anything about those places. Why do you want to paint something you know nothing about? And he took me to a window. I'll never forget this, and said, you see those window panes? There's a painting in every one. You just have to see it. And so I was hooked. Since then, it's become my mission almost to not only paint the landscape, but the Southern landscape. It just has a natural quality that you don't find anywhere else. And not, yes, I am on the bluff of the Mississippi Delta. So in other words, we overlook the flatlands. We have huge skies. It's beautiful. It's very unique. But the southern landscape in general, from bayous in Louisiana to the Florida coast, the natural part of the Florida coast, all of those areas are very unique and to me very underrated. That's become my passion. And I do pastels. I do still illustrate some, but oils really to me capture the depth and the richness that I like to find in my work, from the layering to the brush strokes to just has a luminosity that I don't find with other things.
Okay, that's great to know. And also, thank you so much for sharing that background too. So, when it comes to your arts, what does a typical art mode day look like for you?
So I was fortunate in 2020 to build a larger studio. So I have and that's where we are right now. It's about a 24 by 48 foot studio where I teach. And this section here behind me is actually my studio area. There's a lot that goes into being an artist besides this little space right here. So the morning times are usually everything from running errands to emails to newsletters to marketing things to touching base with galleries, touching base with commission customers. Early mornings, if the light is great, usually I run out and do a little plein air painting. But as we get into the midday, the light most of the time is not as great. And so I'll do stuff in the studio. And then after lunch, it's paint time. I usually paint from 1 to 5 every day. Weekends, some off. If I get bogged down in the studio, then I immediately spend the day. So we go out, we'll plein air paint. I have a group locally of about 5 of us. We travel together, we paint together, and we're in a very rural area. So, we can walk out my studio door basically and paint, so which is lovely.
So, how would you say like the art community has been like with regards to you and also just feeling inspired?
Well, I think community, for years I did not have community. I was raising children for one thing. I was teaching out of a very small room in my house. I was busy, busy, busy. And I kind of let that aspect go, which was a big mistake. And so when I realized that I wished I did have more community, I signed up for a local art guild. And I met 3 of the most wonderful friends ever. Since then, we have traveled all over the country painting. A couple of them will actually be going with me to Europe this summer. And then it expanded, teaching expanded. And that's a community in itself because I've always taught private. I've gone into the school systems privately, but I've never done an 8 to 3 at a school because I didn't want anybody to dictate how I taught. I like the adult. I love my teenagers, and so I've reduced my class. I still have the after school, but only twice a week. But I have a once a week adult class, and then I teach multiple multi-day workshops here in the studio and in various locations. And like I said, this summer in Europe. And so that's a community in itself. And so with the community, whether it's a student or a friend that's on the same level as me, you're getting this feedback. A student, you're having to demonstrate on task, whatever they need you to demonstrate, which is causing growth in your own work. With knowledgeable friends, your friends are going to tell you everything is beautiful. Your knowledgeable art friends are going to say, why'd you paint it like that? So, having friends that can critique and have the knowledge behind their critiques for it to matter. So all of that in a nutshell is insanely important. And that's one of the first things I tell young artists is find a mentor, find a community.
And actually that does bring me to wanting to go back a little bit. Why did you choose to start workshops?
Teaching. When I was in college, if you told me I would teach as much as I do, I would have said, you have no idea how I will not do that. And so as I was raising children, and I have a lot of friends, there are, it's kind of a workshop circuit. There's a plein air circuit, and they're traveling all the time. Well, I wanted to be home and be mom. You have a small window for that. That was my purpose. But I loved being able to submerge students more into teaching deeper foundations. My weekly classes are more like mentoring. So every student may be working on their own project and they can stay with me as long as they want. Some have been with me for years. The workshop scene, they're coming to me, usually it's 3 days, and we have all day for 3 days to dive really deep, total submersion, and me push across the points that I think are so vital.
What does pushing past the points look like for you?
So there's so many levels of being an artist, and I give this little spiel to my students. Your first level is you want to replicate something. The first little goal you meet is that you can replicate it and somebody can say they know what that is. And then from there, you get a little better at it. And your friends and your family say, oh, you're really, really good. You're here, your parents, your friends, everybody says you're great. A lot of people get stuck right there. Some are perfectly happy, but some, they're like, they all think it's great, but maybe it's not. And so you don't know where to go from there. So that's kind of where my workshops start to come in. There's so many artists you can take from, which is wonderful. But most of your workshops, they expect you to know XYZ before you come in. Maybe I have a lot of students who are just now at a point in their life that can do this. They're not going back to school to learn those basic principles: line, color, value, composition, design. So I kind of cater my workshops to start at those fundamentals. Now I'll do others, but my basic one that's most popular is kind of filling the gap, because I want success in my students, whether they're 15 or 55.
With regards to you also now, when it comes to your paintings, where do you get your ideas? Like, where would you say that your ideas or compositions typically begin?
So everything begins with shape. I usually start with an underpainting of shapes. It can be recognizable. It can be very abstract. That design, that basic underpainting design, plein air is a form of study and idea finding. And I have volumes of studies behind me in cabinets. So I'll pull those out for ideas. But then when I come back in the studio, I start with these sketchbooks. And so this is actually like a little computer printout and there's multiples. So I'll start here and I start to find designs. Will it work as a vertical? Will it work as a horizontal? Maybe I'm thinking I'm going to do this vertical. Well, I don't know that unless I play around with different formats. And so, will it go here, whatever. And I'll break it down into just shape and value. So value is basically light and dark. And I want usually around no more than 5 big shapes and no more than 5 values. Most of mine are in the 3 to 4 value range. And those are just like if you turn something into a black and white picture. And so that's simplified thumbnails, what we call these. Then comes over here. This is usually going back to the area and doing a little plein air study. Sometimes I'll do a big one and just glue them in the book. The tree that we had in the ice storm, and I actually loved it with snow, so I did a plein air, and then it went larger. And so I'll see, is it gonna work here? Very simplified before I go larger. Are these colors gonna fit in those value schemes? It may shift a little bit here or there, but I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm gonna do when I'm at this stage. And then I'll take this and go to the larger easel. And so that's kind of the process.
Okay, so when it comes to working outdoors, would you say that there's a particular season, weather condition, or just time of day? You did touch on it before, but that you feel the most creatively drawn to?
Changes. So, I usually am not like right now looking out the windows. We have what we call flat light. It's overcast and midday, which can be beautiful if the scene lends itself to it. But for the most part, it may not interest me as much as, say, early morning, late afternoon, when you've got long shadows and golden light. This time of year in the South, everything is, and from now until October, it's green. Everything is green. So you may get a little bored with green and you get excited about fall. There is a lot of fun with all the colors, but it's also like everything's trying to do its own show, which is can become a little chaotic. So usually it really pertains to just going out, driving. Maybe it is flat light, but maybe there's this little nook of a creek that I've never seen before that really glows in that overcast light. It can depend. I like moody skies. I like stormy stuff. It's just how the mood hits.
Okay. And is there a specific thing, let's say when we're looking at the Southern landscape as a whole, is there a specific thing that you find yourself more drawn to, like as far as creating?
Well, I like we still have simplification here, dirt roads and untouched wetlands. And I love cypress breaks, which there's actually what that is behind me. We don't have crystal clear, bubbly streams, but sometimes the muddy water has its own beautiful color to it. It still has an old feeling to it. It has not been modernized as much. It's still quiet here. It's again, like I said, it's undiscovered. So it's not like having a beautiful area, 150 people around you hiking, or you're usually alone.
And what would you say are 3 words that you would say best describe you?
Curious, driven, inspired.
And with that, what would you say are 3 words that describe your artistic style?
Growing, glowing. I hate that those 2 rhyme. Serene.
And with you saying growing like as the start, where would you see yourself getting to, like ideally artistically within the next 2 to 5 years?
So my goal is for every piece I do to be better than the last one. Does that always happen? But that's the goal. And whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 25 years, I just hope I'm better. I don't ever see myself, and I hope I don't ever see myself saying I've gotten it all. I don't think we should ever feel like we arrived, basically. There's always going to be something to learn. And nature in general always has something to teach.
That's very true. And with that comes my next question, which is when it comes to your art and people receiving your art in terms of visually, what is something that they usually tell you about your pieces?
Well, and they mean this in the best way. They usually say, oh, it looks just like a photograph. And I cringe a little bit at that because it does more from a distance than when you look up close. When you look up close, you can see that things are pretty simplified. A beautiful layman's compliment. As a painter, because it's not a complete rendition of a photograph. You could do that, but most of my paintings, maybe they have one photograph that really grabbed my attention or one particular area that I've done, but they're usually, when the painting comes together, it's a combination of multiple things. And if I'm working from photographs, the last, I would say 25% of the painting, I put all of that away. I just want the painting to tell me what it needs, which I know sounds really weird, but let it show me what it needs to say what I want to say.
I will tap in just to add this part in too, but I do feel that most likely when, someone refers to it as that, it's so beautiful and so crisp, or like, so that is interesting.
And that's why I say that to most people, that's the highest compliment. And so you never want to correct anybody for saying that. Artist friends usually will not use those terms. They'll say, what a fabulous composition, or, oh, your brush work looks amazing, or, your atmosphere is fantastic. You have to honor that compliment and take it from where it comes.
So what's something that you wish that people asked you more often about your art?
Well, I love talking about process. And I get asked that a lot. Plein air painting, I think that's why I enjoy plein air painting at events, because you are painting on location right in the middle of the public, and you have an interaction and a dialogue there. So I just got through painting at a large event in Oxford, Mississippi. It was the Double Decker Arts Festival, and thousands are there, and I'm painting live, just whatever's in front of me. And it gives, the opportunity to see how the process starts, to see how I'm using a brush, to see how I'm mixing the colors. And then you have dialogue from that, because they actually, oh, so why did you mix this? Wow, you can get all that from the, I don't know that there's a basic question I like I just like the interaction itself.
With regards to everything that you do, like whether it's workshop, painting, what would you say that an off season then looks like for you?
The same. My husband, he laughs because he says, when we travel or go on a vacation or something, the last thing I want to do is work. He said the first thing Carol does is unpack the art supplies and get the easels out. It's not work to me, especially when I'm in a new place. That's a whole new ball game, and it's great. It's helped me learn to enjoy travel more, because when you're sketching on location, whether it's watercolors at a cafe or whatever, you're taking in the scene, you're pausing, and you're creating that visual memory versus, snap a picture here, snap a picture there, and keep moving. Especially when I traveled to Italy for the first time, I left there just so refreshed because I just felt like I could just immerse myself instead of trying to do 20 cities in 20 days, I went one spot and we stayed for a week and I painted every day.
That's really cool. When it comes to then being that you're very inspired by and intentional about your paintings, what would you hope that your work leaves behind?
Plein air painting, especially, the world is developing so fast. The landscapes are disappearing. As a plein air painter and a landscape painter, or even, an architectural painter, you are capturing things that may not be there in 10 years, may not be there in 5 years. Like our national parks, they're there and they're preserved, but they're almost being overrun with people who want to take it in, which is, it's kind of a catch-20, because it's destroying some of it. As our footprints get bigger, I hope that maybe what I do preserves some of it.
And also, before the penultimate, when it comes to success as an artist, what does that look like for you, especially with you wanting to continue evolving?
I don't, success is there all the time in little ways. When I step back from a painting and I'm like, that's it, that's success. Somebody I truly admire compliments it, I feel like that's a success. If I get a compliment from someone that I consider, say, a master, then that's success. I don't know, yes, money has to be involved because I want to keep doing this, but I don't know that financial success in the arts is as big of a deal. I mean, I could sell a lot, which I hope I don't, but I see a lot of really bad paintings that get sold. I see a lot of artists that I think could improve making good money. And sometimes that can be a hindrance because you think what I'm doing is good enough. And so you don't try to grow to the next level. So success is way different being monetarily a success. It's respect. I think respect, that would be the word.
Something that you touched on that I did want to loop back onto is being able to step away from the painting. So what does that look like for you when you start something and you feel very overwhelmed?
Right now, if you could see this whole little area I'm in, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paintings in the works right now. It's usually not that crazy, but I've got some pretty big commissions going, and I've got a release with a gallery in July, and I'm leaving to go to Europe mid-June, and so there's a whole lot going on. But I usually try to have 3 to 4 pieces, because if you get bogged down on one, you put it away and you pick up another one. And that, instead of just beating one to death, I call letting it cook. You put it over and you let it cook for a little while, and then work on something different. Or, like I said, go out, do some plein air studies. And sometimes it may be weeks, but when you come back, you can look at it with fresh eyes, and you'll see maybe that thing that you didn't know, you knew something wasn't right, but you couldn't put your finger on it. It's like, oh, that's what it is. So having those multiple pieces going is real helpful. And then, like I said, if I get bogged down too much in the studio, I just get the backpack and head out.
If you could bring someone into one landscape from your body of work and have them experience it in real time, which piece or place would you choose and why?
Oh, wow. It would have to be one of the swamp pieces. Most people think, ugh, but it is just a go in, hear the sounds and the birds and nature and the reflections in the water. And yeah, there are bugs, and yes, there are snakes, not as prominent as most people would think. We actually, a friend of mine and I just finished teaching a workshop in the swamp. Students go out in their kayaks and studies out there, little sketches, and come back, and we work oils on the bank, watercolors from the kayaks. So much fun. It's just you're totally detached from all of the busyness and the noise of the world out there right now.
And lastly, if there was something that you want a collector of yours to take away, like what would that be?
I want them to choose a painting because they feel like they could just step in and keep going and just breathe, to feel like windows into a world.
And with that, I really, really thank you so much for your time and for taking us through your process, your intentions, everything. So thank you so much, Carol.
I'm happy to do it.